So I'm Brandon Nappy. Welcome to Yale. Welcome to Berkeley Divinity School at Yale. Welcome to Yale Divinity School. You are simultaneously in all of those places while also being in your office or being on your couch or at the kitchen table or wherever in the world you are through the miracle of Zoom. Um, I want to welcome you on behalf of not only Berkeley Divinity School at Yale, which is the Episcopal seminary that lives here at Yale, but also on behalf of the Yale Divinity School Office of Continuing Education. We have Kelly Morrissey and Megan Lukens, my amazing colleagues and collaborators who've so generously co-sponsored today's learning. Here at Yale Divinity School, especially in my office in particular, the Office of Transforming Leaders, we work to support the needs of clergy and faith leaders from around the world, from across denominations and even interreligiously. So today feels like a real blessing to be able to make available to you one of my dear friends, colleagues, and thought leader in the space of faith-based leadership, Rabbi Elan Babchuck. And so, all of you have busy lives. Your ministry requires nothing less than everything from you, so that you would take even a few minutes, maybe during your lunch, to learn, to pray, to reflect together on the changing needs of the world, the changing demands that are invited of faith leaders. I am just beyond thankful. And if here in the office we can be supportive to you in any way, please reach out with an email and let us know if there's a specific topic you're hoping we might explore. Let us know that. Our work really encompasses a few different dimensions. We have a podcast called the Leader's Way Podcast, where we explore all sorts of questions around faith and spirituality and leadership. We offer probably 15 courses and workshops like this online each year. We also offer the Leader's Way program, which is a residential program where folks come from all over the world to study here at Yale, to study leadership and innovation and adaptive leadership. It feels like the best of graduate school and the best of summer camp for clergy. And that week happens every June. In fact, applications are currently open. We have a few more spots for the Leaders Way, for Leaders Way Fellows. So if you have any aspirations to join us here in New Haven in June, to step back from your ministry for a week, and then to embrace some kind of adaptive leadership innovation project for the following 7 months online, then I will, in a moment, put the link to that program into the chat box. But mostly, just know that we are so thankful for your presence, and we look forward to this conversation. Let me tell you just for a moment about our wonderful presenter, Rabbi Elan Babchuck, who is the Executive Vice President at the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. He's the founding director of the Glean Network, and I had the great privilege of taking his course in spirituality and innovation. I'd highly recommend it. It's just absolutely fantastic, not only in terms of its content, but also in terms of the kind of community and fellowship that I experienced there. I didn't realize how isolated I was in my leadership and in my ministry until I landed in a group of 20 like-minded hearts and minds. That was really, really sweet. So thank you, Elan, for all you're doing there. And his wonderful book is called Picking Up the Pieces, Leadership After Empire. I hope you will all pick it up. Just in case, Elan, you get humble and shy. It's a really terrific read, and I found it really just supportive to me in my leadership in this sort of how shall we say, dumpster fire of a moment, but one that calls us to meet it with grace and courage and thoughtfulness. So, Elan, thank you for putting that together. I know a book is a labor of love. So, I'm gonna pass the baton along to you, and I just know of my deep gratitude for your presence with us, and we are in your wise and compassionate hands.
Thank you so much, my friend. I really, really appreciate it. Just want to put an extra plug too. You got to follow him on social media. I despise social media. I'm like the biggest Luddite you've ever met in your life. But man, that it's worth the price of admission alone. Just like following Brandon brings so much joy into my life. And there's always something that's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Anyway, just like go do it, and then just it'll brighten up your day. And it doesn't take 2 hours like this class. You can just it's like a 10-second nugget, and you just got a little piece of revelation. The second thing I want to say is here's an invitation. It is the lunch hour for a lot of folks if you're on the East Coast and like enjoy Bon Appetit. And it's totally okay to eat while you're on video. I don't know, like at some point, some Zoom etiquette person said you're not allowed to eat, be human. I would much rather see faces, even if they're like stuffed with burritos, than screens here. So please, if you're comfortable, just like jump on screen. Let's see each other's faces. Let's like witness each other's countenance for a minute here. This is the gift. Like we're here to be human together, and I'm grateful for the humanity that each of you are going to bring into our time together. And if you have to jump in and out or go places, don't worry about it. The one thing I'll say is like don't be on video if you're driving, which is something I actually have to remind our students all the time. They're like, but it's okay. It's like I'm not really paying attention. I'm like, listen, don't pay attention to me. Sign off. Pay attention to the road. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Time is really valuable. It is really valuable. I happen to think it's our most valuable asset because it's the one that doesn't renew. We have compound interest with our money. We can regain trust even after it's been broken. You don't get time back. You don't get time back. And I'm really grateful that you've invested your time to be here. So with that invitation, do whatever you need to do to fully be here, and let's be off. The couple more invitations just about Zoom itself. Anyone know how to like use your reactions? Anyone ever used an emoji? Can you just like show me uh, one emoji that you've got in your back pocket here? We got some hand clapping. We have people laughing so hard they're crying. We have hearts, more clapping, celebrations. That I've never seen that one. That was like a big exploding celebration. All right, I love all of it. Use them liberally whenever you want. Don't feel like you need to raise your hand. I'd much rather you just like interrupt. Let's make it feel more, much more Socratic than didactic. At least that's my goal for our time together. I'm going to be dropping different prompts in the chats. You're going to go into breakouts at certain points. And I hope, that you'll all feel seen and heard and known to the extent that's possible in a full Zoom room during our time together. Last thing I'll say is this. 2 hours is not enough to address how complex the issue that I'm trying to present today is. When leaders get in the way is something once you fully understand this concept, you will see it everywhere you are. Everywhere you are. You will like the next restaurant you go to, you're going to look at the manager and think, man, he's getting in the way. He's like, he's well-meaning and he's trying to be nice, but he's getting in the way. You're going to see it everywhere. So just know, like, let this be the beginning of a conversation. If you have follow-up questions, I'll give you a whole bunch of reading that you can do later. I'll make all these references to other things but just follow up with me. Here's my email address. It's very easy. And I mean it. A lot of people say, yeah, email me and like it'll be great. And then they never get back to you. That's not me. So don't hesitate to be in touch if you have a question. All right. But also don't hold your questions back during our time together. All right. Is that okay? Is that enough of do you want me to do any more preamble? No. You're like, let's go. Okay, let's go. So here's where I want to start. I want to tell you the founding story of my organization. It's called CLAL, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. But I'm going to tell it to you two ways. I'm going to tell it to you the way it was told to me, and then the way that I told it to my students and my friends and my teachers and my colleagues for about 10 years. And then I want to tell it to you a different way that I came to understand was a much healthier way to understand that story about 2 years ago. The story goes like this. We were founded 50 years ago by Elie Wiesel of blessed memory, great humanitarian, Holocaust survivor, and a rabbi named Yitz Greenberg, modern Orthodox rabbi, kind of a rogue thinker, one of the great theologians of the 20th and early 21st century, 92 years old, just published an amazing, amazing book called The Triumph of Life. And they had this idea back in 1974 that the world was changing pretty rapidly, and we needed some kind of think tank and leadership development center in the Jewish world that would also be in constant conversation with the broader world around us. That meant interreligious dialogue, multi-faith projects, and trying to understand and adapt what we were doing inside of Judaism to the shifting landscape around us. So and specifically, they wanted to focus on pluralism, meaning the ability to understand the partial truth of the opinions, beliefs, and behaviors of those that we often disagree with, and to begin to kind of see around the corner into what the future was going to look like in Jewish life and American religious life and beyond. So they had one core conviction, which is that the role of the rabbi was shifting very rapidly, and that lay people, well-informed, educated lay people, would actually form the new body politic of Jewish leadership in this new emerging era. That we had to center lay people and kind of shift away from the hierarchical forms of Jewish life. That meant in synagogues, that meant JCCs, that meant Jewish federations, you name it. We had to flatten the organization, decentralize power, and give more people a voice inside of Jewish life and beyond. So they invited 50 philanthropists and leading rabbis from all around the country to come join them in the Catskills, which is like, this a great place for Jewish retreat centers in the 70s. And they went there for what was supposed to be a 3-day retreat. Yitz stood up, gave a talk that was called The Crossroads of Destiny. You can still find it online today. And essentially said, this is where the world is going. And in Jewish life, that means we're going to be investing less energy and focus on the role of and authority of the rabbi, and more on creating a much broader, decentralized, democratized body politic of leaders that aren't necessarily ordained. And that also means new institutions are going to pop up beyond the synagogues and JCCs and so on. And there were 50 people in the room, major philanthropists, donors, rabbis, all of the people who were deeply invested in the world as it is. And when Yitz finished that talk, he said, essentially, like if you remember the movie Jerry Maguire, when he like sends out the manifesto and he's holding up the goldfish in the bag and he's like, who's coming with me? Right? Yitz essentially says, do you see what I see? And, who's coming with me? Half of the people in the room got up, stormed out, and said, Yitz, you are a heretic, and you will never raise another dollar in American Jewish life, and your vision for the future is heretical. And the other half of the people became our founding board, some of whom are still involved 50 years later. Now, in that version of the story, there are heroes and there are villains. Major change was afoot, and the heroes were pretty clear. Well, Yitz and Elie, who had the vision for the future, and the 25 some odd donors and philanthropists and power brokers inside the Jewish world, they were the heroes too. And who were the villains in this story? Who were the villains?
The ones who stormed out.
The ones who stormed out, exactly. The ones who stormed out are the villains, and it's such a clean, beautiful narrative. And especially as we, last year celebrated our 50th anniversary of that founding moment, it was such a great story to tell. Look at us, the heroes have survived, and so on. You know what I came to realize a couple years ago? Some of those people who left the room went on to sustain, grow, and reimagine some of the most important institutions, not only in American Jewish life, but American democracy as well. Right? Some of those people who said, I don't agree with this vision of the future, went on to build a future of their own, without which this whole system would have collapsed. And I call them the villains of the story. Now, the truth is, there are no heroes and villains when it comes to change management, especially when it's change that is of the heart, right? That kind of storytelling is great for, the Marvel universe, right? And superheroes, but it's not so great when we're talking about matters of the heart, matters of faith. And when we're talking about the future of religious life here in America, which, by the way, is undergoing tectonic shifts right now. I happen to think we're in a moment of tremendous opportunity. So I open with that story because what I've come to learn is it's never as clean as we think it is, especially when we're trying to create stories out of it. But in our heart of hearts, we are, as humans, are wired to tell stories and to shape those stories based on the world as we see it, and also based on our own subjective desires about how that world will shake out. That's just who we are as humans. That's part of what makes us human, is gathering around a fire and telling stories. When it comes to change management, storytelling is a critical part of it, but we have to be really careful about who we name as characters in the story. Which brings me to the second piece that I want to share to introduce this work we're going to do today. Just by show of hands, has anyone seen the show, The Rehearsal? It stars Nathan Fielder. It's on HBO Max. Okay, we got one person. Anyone else seen it? Show of hands. Season 2. Okay. 2 people have seen it. Great. Okay, Kelly and Lindsay, fantastic. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis of what the show's about, and because there's really just one important takeaway that I want to derive. But actually, can either of you tell, in a few sentences, what's the show about? What is The Rehearsal about? Season 2. So in season 2, the premise is that the show explores this phenomenon that aviation researchers have discovered about plane crashes. Most crashes are not caused by mechanical failure or weather. They are caused by social dynamics in the cockpit between the captain and the co-pilot. Social dynamics in the cockpit. The way they came to this realization, in the 1990s, there was an airline called Korean Air. Anyone ever heard of it? 1990s. They had a crash rate that was 17 times higher than American carriers, right? Not American Airlines, but all of the airlines based in America. 17 times higher crash rate. Why? Well, what they discovered is that it was about the cultural world that Korean Air pilots are trained in. Specifically, there's a cultural norm of deference to authority. So co-pilots would watch captains make fatal errors and they would say nothing. Not because they're bad people. Everyone wants to land safely, right? But the hierarchy was so ingrained that they would literally crash rather than challenge the captain. And again, it's not like the captain's a bad person. It's not like the captain wants to threaten anybody's safety, but they see things one way. They don't have, the perspective, even of the person sitting right next to them. And in this particular hierarchical culture, they couldn't even get the perspective of the person sitting next to them because that person was not comfortable sharing feedback that would challenge the authority of the captain. Right? So here you have a quote unquote leader, meaning the pilot, getting directly in the way, subconsciously and inadvertently, getting directly in the way of their mission, which is safely landing the plane. Does that make sense? Any questions about it? And I'm not giving it away. You should see it anyway. It's like a very fascinating. But the argument here is that this captain is essentially a double agent, right? Their authority, their position of power, their confidence becomes the obstacle to the safety of the airplane itself. It's not that they're trying to suppress dissent. They're not authoritarians. They have authority. They're not authoritarians. They don't wake up wanting to crash the plane, but they create conditions where the truth can't get to them. So what I want to think about today, right, this metaphor is for us too. It's not just about cockpits and pilots and planes, but it's about every change process that you've ever been a part of, and especially the change processes that you've led. So the question that we want to sit with today is how do we become obstacles, the very changes that we're trying to make? That's one for reflection. And two, how do we get out of our own way? So to understand this, I want to introduce a framework. There's a distinction that maybe will help reframe how you think about challenges that you are facing. So maybe, here's a prompt, maybe think about a challenge that you're facing. Could be at work, right? Maybe it's within your congregation. Could be a change management process in your neighborhood, in your city. Maybe you're involved in politics. Maybe you're a community organizer, right? There could be so many different ways, but try to bring to mind a change process that you either are already involved in or one that you want to initiate. All right, show of hands. We got something in mind. I'm not going to call on you yet, but just I want to see a show of hands that you've got something in mind. All right, and try to make it something like tactile, maybe something local. I would imagine many of you want to make change, I don't know, in national scope, right? But like try to just think about something that you yourself can have direct impact on and that we can introduce some interventions that can help make that happen. So, okay. Now, I'm going to introduce something really simple. I'm going to give you a signed reading for later, and you can ignore it completely because this is all voluntary. But has anyone ever heard of adaptive leadership? This isn't like going to be a revelation. All of you, if you're in ministry, you're like, yeah, Marty, Ron Heifetz, I get it. I've done adaptive leadership. Okay. So essentially, just for those who haven't seen it, I'm going to give you a really, really like basic breakdown of it because I think it's an important set of inputs for you to have, right? And I've got slides that I can share later. And I had really nice ones with visuals and all that stuff, and they're not working. So what I'm doing is I'm adapting to the moment, and I'm going to give you a lot of this stuff both in the chat and verbally, but I'll also send the slides later. Okay, so in adaptive leadership, there's two kinds of challenges or problems. One of them is called a technical problem. The other is an adaptive challenge, all right? So technical problems have a really clear definition. Who has an example of a technical problem that you might face in your church, for example? Who's got a technical problem? That's great, right? You don't need to do a whole listening campaign. How does it make you feel when the lights flash on and off? What in your imagined future, what would the lights do instead? It's like, okay, the lights don't work. We need the lights to work. This is a technical problem. Great. Now there's bigger technical problems. We're paying too much for X. We haven't fixed Y. The building issues. There's also technical problems inside of org charts. Wait, this doesn't make sense. This person reports to that person, but that person doesn't actually have authority to recommend change in this person's portfolio. We got to fix that. Bylaws. Those are technical problems that you can often overcome. Adaptive challenges require learning just to define the problem. You actually have to go through a learning process just to get at what is the problem. And the problem often is not the presenting problem. The presenting problem often is a symptom. You've got to ask, the Toyota 5 Whys technique. Somebody who's quick can just like Google Toyota 5 Whys and drop a link to it in the chat. You guys can read it later. It's essentially doing what a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old would do when you say, it's time to go to bed. Why? Because it's your bedtime. Why? Because you need a good night of sleep. Why? Because when you wake up in the morning after you don't have 11 hours of sleep, you're really cranky. Why? Because then I need more coffee than I can brew in the morning to deal with you. Okay? That's like, and maybe there's another why after that. And maybe I should switch to decaf, but neither of those things have happened. And here we are. So the 5 whys is how you get to the bottom and try to understand an adaptive challenge. In technical problems, there are known solutions that exist. Oh, we can replace the lights. Easy. In adaptive challenges, you have to experiment a little bit, right? Adaptive leadership requires a willingness to experiment with new solutions and then learn from those experimentations and then grow from it. And finally, you might land on something that totally works. Technical problems often rely on experts or authority. What's the technical problem? Oh, well, we need someone who can rubber stamp this new, the solution to this issue. We need someone who can approve a higher budget for this program. We need someone who can, or has a certain expertise to fix something. Adaptive challenges often don't rely on expertise. They rely on experience. They rely on people to articulate their values, their beliefs, and their habits, and to express an openness to change any of the above. Finally, the system can solve technical problems in its current capacity. So in other words, if you ever heard the concept of a zero-sum game, your budget, let's say your budget is $1 million, okay? And we need to now spend $100,000 on Dawn's lights. What does that mean? We're going to have to cut 100,000 somewhere else. There's nowhere else to cut 100,000. We are no longer in a technical problem area because within our current constraints, the system can't fix it. It can't manage all of the issues at play. So now we need an adaptive solution. Well, we can raise more money. We can shut the lights off. We can have a spotlight. We can do candles, right? Those are some adaptive solutions that we can experiment with. All right, so that's how we can, begin to understand this distinction. Now, obviously, in this case, I want us to lean in the direction of adaptive leadership, right? When we're thinking about change management, I want us to be thinking through the lens of adaptive leadership. What I would argue is, if you came to this class and there were a technical solution to the challenge that you are facing, you probably could have gotten the solution from ChatGPT. Right? You probably, honestly, you wouldn't be spending your lunch with me. That's for sure. Maybe you'd be taking a donor out to lunch and trying to raise that last 10,000 so you can, hire the music director. Right? Chances are you're thinking along the lines of an adaptive challenge that we're facing. And when the world is spinning at the pace that our current world is spinning, it's like it's going to spin off its axis. Feels like change is constantly underway. It's really hard to manage when you're trying to hold down an institution. And asking the right adaptive questions is often, we often don't even have time to get to that because our days are so full, right? Our plate is so full. It's like, I can't even fit an amuse-bouche on my palate right now because I am so full. My life is so full, okay? So I get that, and that's why we're here. Okay. And by the way, I want to say this. In my years, in whether I'm been a leader, coached leaders, most of the leadership failures come from treating adaptive challenges like technical problems. Right? Most leadership failures come from treating adaptive challenges like technical problems. We hire consultants when we need conversations. We reorganize the org chart when we need to actually reorganize our assumptions. We look for the right problem when actually we need the right questions. We want someone, some expert, some authority to hand us the solution when actually the solution requires us to change. Right? Everyone loves being involved in change management processes. Nobody likes to change. It's like, I don't like changing. It's really hard. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes I have to admit, oh gosh, there are ways that I'm getting in the way. Oh goodness, the things I thought I was doing that I thought I came with the best intentions, I'm actually subverting the independence, the growth, the potential of the people around me and of this institution. That's like a yikes moment for leaders. So we grasp for technical solutions because, if it's a technical problem, then I don't need a change. So we misdiagnose. We build these wrong assumptions into the work that we do because if it's only about the lights flickering on and off, then I don't need to do any grief work. I don't need to reckon with the world changing. I can still imagine that sustaining the world as it is, sustaining the institution as it is, being a leader as I have been, that's what the world needs from me right now. But I think we're in an adaptive moment because there are tectonic changes underfoot. And so the first person who needs to be open to the possibility that they need to change is me. I'm going to pause there. Any questions before we go into, I've got five characters I want to introduce into our little drama here. Any questions before we move into that? Okay. Oh, Evan. I know Evan. Hi, Evan. Okay. Also, hi, everybody else who I haven't called out individually, but we're just getting to know each other here. Okay. Here's the next thing I want to cover. That's, let's see, breakout 1. Okay. It's going to be relatively quick because it's already 12:35. But I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to skip the breakout, and I want to see if I can get 2 volunteers. 2. And it's okay if you're like, it's going to be somebody else because I don't want to do it. But I'd love to have 2 volunteers. And the questions I want to ask is, what's the change that you're currently involved in or that you want to initiate? Right. So if somebody has a change that they're willing to play with me for a minute, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about it, raise your hand or just unmute yourself and say, I've got change. I'm here to make change. This is real. Like this is real. And I think understanding the ways that we ourselves are stakeholders is critically important, that we ourselves are players in this drama, in the unfolding drama of what's taking place in our ministries, in our congregations, in our communities, even in our country. That we have to ask 2 things, and this is jumping ahead a little bit. We'll get to a concept called the theory of the emerging future, which I'll teach in a little bit. But we always have to ask ourselves, what do we stand to lose if the change takes effect? And how do we benefit, knowingly, unknowingly, consciously, subconsciously, from the world staying exactly as it is? We have to ask ourselves, how do we stand to benefit from the world staying exactly as it stays? That's a really important self-reflection prompt. We don't always know how we benefit, or we aren't always willing to acknowledge and own the ways that we benefit from the world as it is. Because we really want, in our heart of hearts, the world to change. We want to leave a better world for our kids and our grandkids than the one we found. One that's more just and equitable and kind and loving. We want to leave better congregations for our successors. What better gift would it be to ministry to find a successor who comes along in 5 or 10 or 15 years and says, oh my gosh, this place is really on the upswing. Healthy budget, no deficit, the building doesn't leak, the lights don't flicker on and off, the sound system's great, good culture, great order. Oh my gosh, we want to do that. We do. And we always have to ask ourselves, but how do we benefit from things just kind of staying exactly as they are? The hard question. So thank you, Ben. Thank you for doing that. Okay, now we're going to talk about our cast of characters, these archetypes of change. Before we introduce them, I want to talk about Moses as the unwitting double agent. Okay? Our friend Moses is an unwitting double agent. Of course, we're talking about change management processes. And for all the books that have been written about like Moses as the great leader, Moses as the archetypal leader, Moses as the prophetic leader, and so on and so forth, he ended up pretty well. His last sermon's a pretty good sermon, like the entire book of Deuteronomy. Excellent stuff. And he's not a born leader. Okay, his call happened at a time when he said, I'm not the guy, at least in his current state, he was right. At least in his current state, he was right. But he took the call eventually, after some back and forth with God. He took the call, and his job was to get them out of Egypt to safety to the promised land. Right? The only problem was what? Where was Moses' conception of leadership shaped? Where did he grow up? Where did he grow up?
Egypt.
Egypt,
All his
in
training.
the empire.
Mhm.
Okay, who's the quintessential Egyptian leader when you think of Egyptian leaders in the Torah, in the Bible? It's Pharaoh. Okay, there's a reason why pharaonic leadership became a term, because it's not that good, right? What is Pharaoh all about? He consolidates all the power at the top. He holds complete authority and control through coercion. Okay. And anytime people below him try to speak up or exercise their own power, independence, so, their own agency, he moves the goalposts, makes it harder on them, and uses force to keep them down. Not a great leadership mold. Now, we can say, yeah, but that was thousands of years ago. We're done building pyramids. Now, in our society, we're enlightened and we know that every individual has uniqueness and was created in the divine image, and we would never treat people that way in our society. Yikes. We still live in the empire. When we look at leadership models on TV, on Shark Tank, on any pretty much name a leader, right? And I'll tell you, they're not that far from Pharaoh. Name a famous leader or infamous one, right? They're coercive. They are charismatic. They are controlling. Coercive, charismatic, and controlling. So Moses grew up in a world where that is the ideal leader. What's the first thing he does when he sort of goes out on a limb and begins to feel at least that the world is unjust? What's his first action?
He kills somebody.
He kills somebody. He doesn't go out of hey man, I don't think you should be whipping that guy so hard. That's not nice. Have a conversation with him. Take him out for coffee or whatever they drank. Like, go take a swim in the Nile with him. You guys have a conversation. No, he kills him. He kills the guy. Okay. And then finally, they get out, and he's starting to build up an institution, a structure inside of this Israelite nation. What does Jethro say to him? Chapter 18 of Exodus. The people are waiting in line day and night, and he's judging them day and night. Moses, when there's 613,500 people out there, 603,500 people, Moses is the only one judging them. So what does Jethro say? Get some help, man. Get some help. You need to raise up judges and chieftains and a whole leadership structure so you're not the only one. Look what you're doing to the people. In other words, he's holding up the mirror and he's saying, Moses, you're getting in your own way. You are unwittingly, you think you're serving the people, but you are creating a system of servitude to you. You think you're serving the people, but you've set up this system in which they serve you. You are holding all the power, all the authority. You are the only one who has a connection to God. And you're telling them, just follow me. Okay? That's example one of his formation. Okay, he holds all the power. The second, he strikes the rock, Numbers 20. They're thirsty, they're desperate for water. God says, speak to the rock. What does he do? He uses force. Again, force. Where did he learn force? Egypt. He hasn't yet unlearned all of these instincts. Finally, he shatters the tablets when he gets mad. Why? Again, force, coercion, power. That's his understanding of how leadership works. Now, I'm not saying we're all Moses in this way. I'm not saying we're all Pharaoh in this way, but I'm saying even the biblical character that is so often described as the quintessential archetype of leadership sometimes gets in his own way. So with that in mind, here's 5 archetypes that when we're thinking about change management, and everybody, if you nodded your head before, you've got an idea in mind, right? One change process you are working on or want to initiate. Yes? Okay. Any brave souls, put them in the chat. I want to hear about more change processes, not just, maybe there's more mergers happening. Maybe there's acquisitions. I don't know. Whatever you're doing, I want to hear about it. Here's the 5. The pilot is the first one. Now, the pilot has formal authority and has positional power. Anyone here the senior pastor or the solo? Okay. Everybody say hi to your pilots. These are your captains. Their job is to get us safely from A to B, land us at the airport, and if we have kids on the plane, give us those little pins, right? Whatever it is, that's your job. You are the pilots. So you have formal authority. You're at the top of the org chart. You hold the control. You set the direction. You have access to the instrument panel, the budgets, the information, the key relationships. Sometimes you are the sole connector to those key stakeholders. You see the big picture, right? The pilot gets you, all of us in the back, we just have those tiny little windows and we're looking side to side. The pilot has a massive, massive window to look through in the front, right? So the pilot gets to see things 30,000 feet and miles ahead. They also hold many of the constraints and challenges. They have the capacity to mobilize resources, initiate change, set vision, set direction. But one of the challenges, of course, of being a pilot and thinking again about this example from that show, The Rehearsal, is that when you are 30,000 feet up, yes, you have perspective, but it also creates distance from the facts on the ground. It creates distance from the experiences on the ground, the dangers on the ground, the opportunities on the ground. You are sometimes so far removed from it that you might not have a real understanding. Next is the co-pilot. Significant responsibility. So you have the ability to override the controls. It would be very costly, potentially to your career, certainly to your relationship with the captain or the pilot, but you can. But you also have to navigate around the captain's authority and their predilections. This could be a senior staff, an associate, clergy, a board chair, key volunteer, maybe even a donor, key donor. They might see what the pilot sees. They might be closer to the ground, perhaps, closer to the congregants. Their job is to bridge the pilot's vision and the reality of the crew. And they have perspective. Maybe you're younger than the senior, in which case you've got a generational perspective that the senior doesn't have. Right? I'm a geriatric millennial. The president of my organization is a boomer. So we see the world differently. That's a gift. That person can give that gift of perspective to me, and I've got that gift of perspective for them. But we see the world differently, and that can be great. Now, then we have a set of three, and they come together. Anyone ever heard of the fight, flight, or freeze? Right? When you're facing something really scary, you get maybe it's a cortisol response. Some people like scary things. You go to like scary movies. So maybe for you, it's an adrenaline plus cortisol combination. Maybe there's dopamine involved. Whatever's happening in your brain, fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. And these are the three. The first is the early adopter. The early adopter is going to have a fight response. They embrace the change, even sometimes before it's fully formed. Right? They're the ones you go to and say, I've got this wild idea. Can I bounce it off of you? And they're like, great, let's go. Let's champion it immediately. And they will go to the mat for you. They'll fight for you. They'll fight for that change too. All right. Early adopters are great partners. They're the yes and people. They're the ones who always agree to join committees, whether it's an ad hoc committee or something else. They can sometimes, though, move so fast that they alienate the next group. The next group are the fence sitters, the ones whose response is to freeze. Right? If you're the pilot, they're still sitting at the gate. They're frozen in the face of significant change. We have to ask ourselves, why? Right? Maybe actually they're just, if you look at the scales of change of what's really exciting about the potential and what's really scary that I might lose, maybe they just balance out perfectly even. And so those people are thinking, I just don't know. I really just don't know. Both possibilities seem like they're scary, but also have potential and exciting, and I just don't know. And the thing with these fence sitters, um, they're probably the silent majority in most systems. It's probably you're not going to hear from them. The truth is, you as a pilot or co-pilot or significant leader, you are not going to hear from the fence sitters because they don't have strong opinions formed yet. They can be swayed as a body politic pretty easily and pretty quickly without your awareness. So if you're trying to navigate a change management process, you have to be keenly aware about these folks. You have to make sure to listen to them, not write them off just because they don't have a really polarized opinion about it. You know, they're not the ones who want to change immediately. They're not the ones who hate change. They're somewhere in the middle. Make sure to listen to them. They are a silent majority. By the way, here in America, I'm not doing politics today, but here in America, 87% of Americans would prefer a less polarized national conversation. 87% are tired and exhausted by the hard right, hard left, hot takes that happen on both sides. 87% would like more moderation in speech and are more interested in finding ways that we see the world through each other's eyes rather than as good and evil. 87% are exhausted by it. And I would imagine you're going to find a silent majority just like that in your congregations. Some people who kind of want change but aren't sure. Kind of want to stay the same, but maybe enticed to change. So keep an eye on them. They're your largest group. The last is the resistor. These are flight. They are actively or passively working against the change. If the early adopters are the yes ands, these are the yes but, or the no but. They are your loyal opposition. Sometimes they're vocal, sometimes they work passive aggressively, and they will sabotage things quietly. In a similar change management process to what Ben described earlier, many years ago, there was two Jewish temples, congregations that were exploring a merger, went through a process over 3 years, brought in many consultants to make it work, got the votes, raised the money, and got to the finish line twice, only to have it sabotaged. And it was not publicly known why it was sabotaged. As it turns out, a key board member, and it's important to know, right? Sometimes people have a vote, but it's actually a veto. Right? Sometimes people are so powerful as stakeholders that what you think is a vote is actually a veto. Now, this individual had lost a child who was a teenager about 30 years prior, and had given a significant gift to rename the sanctuary at their synagogue and dedicate the sanctuary to his child who had passed away. They had already had the conversations with this individual about the ways that they were going to sort of transfer that dedication to the new synagogue, and they were going to bring the plaques and the pews and the name and so on. And maybe in his heart of hearts, he was ready to make the change. But every time they got to the final vote for which they needed unanimity, he voted against it. It happened twice, and the merger never happened. So I share this with you because, again, there are no heroes and villains in these stories. There are no heroes and villains. Even the resistors who actively or passively, consciously or subconsciously are fighting to sabotage the effort, even those people are coming at it with full hearts and best intentions. And sometimes it's just too painful to make change. It's really important to know that, like just to be reminded of that. And I'm sure you all know that. Okay, so I'm curious to know, I'm going to put in a quick poll for the chat. When you think about change processes, which archetype do you tend to default to in most change processes? And after this, by the way, we're going to take a quick break. So curious to know, pilot, co-pilot, early adopter, fence sitter, or resistor when you think about change processes. Great. We got an early adopter, a pilot, a co-pilot, an early adopter, pilot and early adopter. Nice, nice. Pilot, pilot. Great. What's an F? Ah, the fence sitter. Good. I like that, Troy. Thank you. P or E, E or F. This is like the new Myers-Briggs. F, I have to have all the facts. P, in my ministry. Nice. Good. Good. Early adopter, pilot. Okay, fantastic. That's really good to know. Good. The next activity when we come back is we're going to play out some of these change processes through a different lens. So as you're going to break, if these are your natural inclinations, if you are naturally a pilot, you're naturally an early adopter, I want you to think about the process that you have in mind, the one that you came up with. When we get back, I'm going to ask you in small groups, just in pairs, and it's going to be a quick couple of minutes. I'm going to ask you to argue on, as if you are one of the other characters, one of the other agents in the change process. So if you're naturally a pilot, I want you to argue in your case as if you are a resistor or a fence sitter. Make sense? So you're going to have an opportunity to do that in groups of, I'll put you in groups of 3 because I'm guessing there's a chance if I put you in pairs, there might be one person might not be fully present. So that's fine. We'll put you in 3 when you get back. It is 1:01. Take 9 minutes. We'll come back at 1:10. Sound okay? All right. I'll see you all in 9 minutes. Have a good break. Friends, welcome back. Got like 30 seconds. So take care of that one last thing you were taking care of. And come on back. And if you can, join on video. And if not, that's okay. All right. I am going to call an audible. This is an adaptive moment, perhaps. I want to make sure that we have a good chunk of time at the end for kind of like open-ended questions, Q&A. And so I don't want to eat up too much now. And I'm also aware that probably a couple people are still kind of working their way back from lunch. So what I'm going to do, with your permission, is rather than going into that breakout, talk about the different archetypes, I want to move us to the next part of our time together, which is going to be about this concept of the theory of the emerging future. Is that okay with all of you? You will have more time. I believe we're going to have enough time for a breakout later, but I just want to, I'm kind of trying to read the room and want to make sure we get through at least some of the didactic stuff so that we can sort of open it up for more Socratic conversation later. All right. You know what? Do folks want to like double click on that for a minute? On just like sort of thinking through the experiences of someone else in a change process? What do you think? Spend a couple minutes on it? No, we're good. Okay. All right. It is critically important, right? Critically important. I think it's also true for how we can perhaps model a different kind of leadership, just as a society in this day and age. It's really easy to assume that the person with a different opinion than ours is not just wrong, but name the epithet: evil, dumb, sinister, bad, let alone misguided. It's easy to make those assumptions. And in fact, not just easy, it's also easy to galvanize your congregation if you create an us and them. Right? It's really easy to say, hey, those of us who are ready to make this change, we're the enlightened ones. And the people who are going to push against us, those are fill in the blank, uninformed, they're heretical. No. Again, if we start with the premise that nobody is a hero and nobody is a villain, the first thing you have to do is dethrone yourself. You're not the hero. I'm not the hero. No heroes in the game. The second thing you have to do is remember that actually the resistors, and let's say I'm a pilot, you're a resistor. I'm an early adopter, you're a resistor, whatever it is. And again, we're all still marginal because the largest majority is who? The fence sitters. The fence sitters. All right. If we are to operate under the assumption that we want to advance the change and someone else wants to hold it back, okay, that's great. You know what the resistors are going to do for you? They're going to help sharpen your understanding of the issue itself. They're going to actually, by pushing, they are actually going to force you to ask the right questions in the moment and to understand, oh, wait a sec, if there's somebody who feels this way about this issue, that means there isn't consensus. And by the way, you should always beware of consensus in your congregations. There is no such thing. There is no such thing as a unanimous vote. It just means that you don't have the right people around the table. It means that maybe you are subconsciously selecting the quote unquote right people around the table who happen to agree with you. Then you don't have a cabinet, you have yes people. There is no such thing as unanimity. All right? Treat the resistors like the gift that they are. They will help refine your understanding of the world as it is, so together you can build a better world as it could be. They are not your enemies. They are not your opposition. Make sense? I say that as somebody who's proudly a resistor. In fact, at a board meeting for one of the organizations I'm on, the board chair really wanted a unanimous vote, and I voted against it. Not because I'm like a jerk, but actually I believed that the proposal that was on the table at the time had not fully thought out the matters properly. And this board chair really wanted to just get to yes so that they could, because there's a real sense of urgency. And I get the sense of urgency, but urgency often leads us to do things that are actually not in our best interest. Not in our best interest. So yes, it's important to think in 1 day increments or 1 month increments or 1 year increments. But, you know, in the world of religion, if we're not dreaming generationally, I think we're maybe in the wrong business. Okay, that's like, sermon over. You can also disagree with me. Be a resistor, all right? If I'm a pilot here, at least be a co-pilot and be like, hey, there are some clouds ahead. Okay, let's talk theory U. Otto Scharmer, a MIT professor, quotes Bill O'Brien, the late CEO of Hanover Insurance, who says the success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. Repeat it. The success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. I do a lot of work with the military. On Monday, in fact, I give a keynote to the newly minted brigadier generals. So all the new 1-star generals in the US Army, they go through a 2-week training. They're in week 1 now. I go in on Monday and give a leadership talk it's going to be about 175 plus their spouses. And one of the hardest things to do when you've achieved that level of success in the military, right? It's a tiny percentage. It's a tiny, I think it's 0.5%, maybe, I didn't get the numbers right, become a 1-star general. 0.5%. And your entire leadership journey from that point on, right? Only about half of them are going to get 2-star, much smaller percentage, 3, almost no one gets 4, okay? For the vast majority of the people in that room, their military career ends in 36 months. Their military career ends, once you hit 1 star, you have 1 12-month installation, then you get moved to another 12-month installation, and finally 1 last 12-month, and then chances are you're hanging it up. Right? Those people have every reason to only listen to the yes people. Right? They should have every incentive. Okay, I'm here at this new installation. The mission before me is X. I'm going to get X done. And if there are resistors in the way, my job is to silence them. That would be the leadership instinct of so many people who have a short timeline and who know that lives are on the line. And yet, you know what they're trained to do? Pay really close attention to the resistors. When lives are on the line, pay really close attention to the naysayers. All right. So in our work, I think we can learn that too. It's critically important. Thank you for lifting that up, Larry, and thank you for your service. Right. So next, theory U. I never want to downplay how important that is to think about the interior condition of the intervener. That's us. That's me. That's you. That's your co-pilots. That's your lay people. The interior condition. Right. When I say, how are you? When I say, what shape are you in these days? I really mean that we have to take time to ask that question of ourselves and sit with it. How are you? What is your interior condition? It's very easy to observe what leaders do because we can measure it. What are the results? What are your outputs? It's very easy to observe how they do it. What are your methods? What are your processes? And there are tons of business classes that you can take at every executive leadership, program at every business school in the world. And they can tell you all about what to do and how to do it. But you know what they can't tell you? They can't tell you what does the inner place from which you operate look like and feel like. What is the condition of your spirit as you are embarking on this change process? Are you weary? Are you frustrated? Are you tired? Are you energized? Do you feel beloved by your community? When you think of the countenances, the faces of the people, whether they're resistors or early adopters or co-pilots, what comes up for you as you imagine their faces? Do you love them? Do you love this community enough that you would do anything for it? And if so, what does it feel like to have that sense of love for a community? Keep in mind, that means that a lot is on the line. If you genuinely love these people, if you genuinely love this community, if you genuinely wake up every morning and hear your call once every time, right? Every morning, every day, you feel that call, you feel driven to do it. If that is true, you have a lot on the line. And that means your interior spirit has to match your exterior output. That might mean you have to take a sabbatical. That might mean you actually have to unplug on your Sabbath. That might mean you need someone around you who can tell you the truth lovingly. You have to take a break. Whatever it means, you have to tend to your inner temple just as you are tending to the flock. The interior condition. All right. Think of it like an iceberg. What we can measure, the what and the how, that's like the 10% above the water. That's the 10% above the water, which is really nice, right? The Titanic didn't hit the 10% above the water. The Titanic hit the 90% of the iceberg that was below it. Right? So we have to be understanding there's so much. The inner condition is so critical to tend to. We cannot transform the behavior of systems, especially ones that we're involved in, unless we transform the quality of the attention that people apply to their actions within those systems. Right? In other words, you can't change a system by working on the system. We talk about systemic issues all the time in our country. All the time we talk about systemic issues, right? And we solve systemic issues with technical solutions. Why? Because we're genuinely afraid to ask the real questions about the quality of awareness that we bring to the system, about the inner condition of the people involved in the system, ourselves included. That's why we reach for technical solutions and we hire consultants and we defer to experts. because frankly, it's an easier thing to do to have than we get to avoid. The bigger question is, what's my condition? Whoa. Whoa, what's my condition? And that's where the double agent hides, right? The leader can say all the right things about change, myself included. They can have the best intentions. But if they're operating from fear, from scarcity, from ego, from control, the system will react accordingly. And it responds to the source, not the words. It responds to its roots, not the what or the how. That's how systems perpetuate systems. That's why we call them systems, not trends, right? Not liminal contexts. Systems become systems because they're really hard to change, because changing them involves asking some hard questions and really tapping into our inner experience. Here's where Parker Palmer's Let Your Life Speak is a must read. A must read. Right. So I'm going to share a brief story to make this concrete. And then after that, there's three voices that I want to introduce into this work of bending the beam of observation. All right. When Otto Scharmer talks about making change inside of systems, generally speaking, when we talk about systems, we externalize systems. Okay, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Actually, here's a brief vignette. When I was working as a community organizer in Los Angeles, there was a church in Hollywood that we went to visit. I worked for One LA, which is part of the Industrial Areas Foundation. Famous claim to fame is that my boss trained Barack Obama. Right, so he was part of the Industrial Areas Foundation, based in Chicago. I was living in Los Angeles, so I was part of a network called One LA. We have 82 churches, synagogues, schools, and so on that were member institutions of One LA. At the time, this was 2007, the biggest issue we were facing was that we were working on was around two issues: workforce development, which the focus was really in mid-city. There just were not companies that were creating jobs for the people that actually lived in the mid-city, and gang violence in South LA and South Central. So those were what our member institutions wanted to work on, and we were building power through conversation, storytelling, and relationship building. All right. I went to Hollywood, where we didn't yet have a member institution. There's a large church in Hollywood, and I went to talk to somebody there. Said, "Hey, let's talk about, like, what are the issues what keeps you up at night, and so on." And she gestures and says, "Oh, we're fine here, but I want to go there and fix the systems that are broken there." Where's she pointing? Right? She's pointing down the Hollywood Hills all the way to South LA, saying, we don't have problems here. I want to fix those systems. It's really easy to take ourselves out of this thing called the system, right? But if the folks in Hollywood ask some hard questions, how is it possible that you feel a complete sense of safety and security? Nobody here has economic vulnerability, which, by the way, wasn't true. There were many, many congregants of that church that lost their home in 2008 during the housing crisis. But how is it possible that you can feel so safe and secure when people less than 2 miles away are as vulnerable as they are? That's called a system. You are part of that system, even as you want to point that way to say that that's where the system resides. Let me share another story about a senior rabbi, a dear friend of mine. I was running a workshop. It was kind of like, it was post the first wave of COVID. So it was like, this was 2021, late 2021. And the senior rabbis of about 20 of the largest synagogues in the country came together for a day of sort of think tanking. And we were using this process called the theory of the emerging future to try to think about, like, what are some possibilities for us to respond to this moment in a way that's equitable, thoughtful, and viable for the future. right? And actually serves the needs of the broader populations in our communities. So the senior rabbi comes in of one of the biggest synagogues in the country. There are 5 or 6 rabbis and 3 cantors on her staff, massive, massive congregation, and she's totally burned out. And I'm changing some facts of the story just so to keep this person anonymous. Really, really burnt out. And we're going around talking about, oh, well, we could try this and we could try this. And oh, you could partner with that synagogue and you guys, great ideas are coming about. Great ideas are coming about. And she finally says, look, I hate to burst the bubble here. This is all good and well, but I am totally burned out. I'm really tired. This has been leading a congregation during COVID has been so hard. Who else feels that way? And everyone's, yeah. So we said, okay, how many other rabbis are at your synagogue? Do they all feel the same way? Interesting. How many other senior staff? Do they all, executive director, operations, the whole C-suite of people in the synagogue and so on? I said, tell me about yesterday. Like conceptually, I get that you're burned out, but tell me about yesterday. So she lists all of the things she had to do. She was going through her calendar. Said, then I had to do this, and then I had to do this, and then I had to do this. Now I could have gone back and forth and said, I think someone else could have taken that meeting. And I think someone else probably could have taken that meeting. But I said, okay. And she said, and then I finally got home at 7 p.m. Right? And that was just for dinner because I had to go back for an 8:30 meeting. And then I caught up with my email. And I said, how many emails did you send yesterday? She said, well, I received 200 and I had to respond to about 126. I said, you wrote 126 emails yesterday. She said, yeah, well, that's part of my job. So I said, I want to ask you a question. How many of those emails required your expertise, your relational connections, your wisdom, your authority, your power to respond to? So I'm going to be really, really honest. You have a lot of other people on the staff. I don't think anyone else is writing 126 emails, right? She said, maybe 20. So I said, you got 200, only 10% of which actually would require you to respond to them. So why are you responding to 126? She said, well, it's because it's busy. And then I said, no, I'm not taking that. Because the system demands so much of the senior rabbi. I said, no. What would happen if your response to 106 of those emails was, thank you so much. I wish I could help you. Here's someone on my team that can help. What would happen? She said, well, I guess then those people would no longer feel like they needed me. And I said, oh, now we're onto something. Yes, there is a pretty terrible system that puts you in a position to have to receive 200 emails a day when you have a massive staff that could and should otherwise be the recipients of those emails. But somehow in this system, everyone in your community thinks, if I need something, I'm going to the senior rabbi. And you can complain about that system and say you're burnt out by that system. But until you recognize, bend the beam of observation back up to the Hollywood Hills, bend the beam of observation back to how you spend your time and why, and what would happen if you changed. Oh, I guess I would feel less needed. There's your answer. Our work, if we really want to discover who the unwitting double agents are in our communities, we have to ask ourselves how we ourselves are contributing to the world as it is, even as it drives us nuts. Even as we want to complain about the world as it is. Because by the way, the world as it is pretty rough. But we have to push ourselves or have someone like Jethro hold up the mirror and say, hey, look what you're doing to the people, yourself included. Right? We have to be willing to bend the beam of observation, not like a telescope, bend it back. That's why it's called theory U, to bend that beam back onto ourselves and ask ourselves, what's the inner condition of our lives? How is my spirit such that I am actually contributing to the world as it is. I'm contributing to my own burnout unwittingly. I say that, I share that story only because I could easily put myself into that character of the senior rabbi and tell you that I need someone to tell me that at least every 3 months. Why'd you go to that meeting, Elan? Oh, because it was so important, because it was like, I have experience. Get out of here. You didn't need to be there. What's the worst can happen? Someone else can gain the expertise, can prepare for that meeting and lead it. And you'll find out, oh, I guess that wasn't that important. How many of you, I'm going to ask, how many of you have a sabbatical clause in your contract? How many of you have taken a sabbatical? Thank you. Thank you. By the way, the same was true for me when I was in a pulpit. Big congregation, 850 families, about 2,000 people. I had the sabbatical clause in my contract. Didn't do it. Never took it. I have a sabbatical clause in my contract right now. The only chance that I will take it is if my next book contract comes through, and I'll find out in a couple weeks. And every one of you should email me and say, when's your sabbatical? Because I'm going to say, oh, but I can't because this project and this thing's happening. And you know what? Like, thank God for my wife, because she will literally just like she'll change my email password so that I can't get in anymore for at least 3 months until I write the stupid book. All right. That's the question to ask. How many of you argued, you fought for that sabbatical clause in your contract, didn't you? And you haven't taken it. Okay. Enough browbeating. I say this because I genuinely I think the world needs you to be rested, and your communities need you to find rest, and your inner life, right? The interior condition of the intervener needs all of your wherewithal to make it happen in a moment like this, to embrace the potential that this moment brings. So here's the last piece I want to introduce. There are 3 voices that I think block our own ability to be fully present with that process of bending the beam. 3 voices. These are the 3 internal enemies of transformation. That's not the resistor. Right? I started off this class today, right, talking about these 5 change agents. Maybe sometimes, you're the pilot, sometimes you're the early adopter, and I talked about them like they're 5 different people, because that's the easiest way to understand it. Oh, Joe is a resistor. That's the guy who always votes no. Luann is the fence sitter because she never votes. She always abstains, right? It's easy to think about them as 5 different people. Now, what's really true? Every one of us has a little bit of resistor in us, even if we're the pilot. And every one of us kind of is jealous of the fence sitter. Like, it would be nice if I didn't have to have a strong opinion about this thing. Because the truth is, I'm a little divided about it. Those voices are inside every single one of us. Now, we might identify most strongly with a resistor in a certain moment. In fact, we might be actively resisting something in our lives, in the world, in society right now. But I think recognizing that those 5 people are actually not discrete agents. We flow in and out of resistance, in and out of fence sitting, of early adopting, of piloting, of co-piloting. We wear those hats sometimes interchangeably. So what are the 3 voices that block that internal presencing that allows us to figure out who we are in the drama? One of them is the voice of judgment, which blocks your open-mindedness. Now, I live in Providence, Rhode Island. I've been here 13 and a half years. It's a very, it's a wonderful, beautiful community, multi-generational, with a long institutional history. Everyone here remembers everything that's ever happened. And if you moved to Rhode Island 35 years ago, you're not really from here. You're only from here if you've been here 3 generations. And if you can tell me, oh, I live at like 27 Elm Grove Ave. If you can't tell me the 15 families that lived at that house in the previous 200 years, you're not really from Rhode Island. That's like one of the things here. So of course, anytime you have a board meeting, there's going to be somebody who says, what? That'll never work here. We tried that in 1987 and it totally failed, right? Our people are never ready to, that's not how we do things here. So what does that do? What does this voice of judgment do? It blocks curiosity. It shuts new ideas down. It prevents seeing around the corner, keeps us trapped in what we know. And I do it too. I do it too. I've been here long enough that even, in whatever 13 and a half years, I can say, oh, we tried that once in 2013 and it didn't work out. Guess what? Like, that's my proudest moment. I've now become part of the old guard. But the problem is we filter that voice of judgment. We use that internally also. Even if you think you're the pilot, even if you think you're the change agent, even if you think you're the early adopter, there's still a part of you that is judging those ideas and closing things down. Now, what does that stop? It stops the process of real discernment, of maybe recognizing patterns, of having wisdom from experience, and creates a sense of closed-mindedness. Next, there's the voice of cynicism. Now, those people don't really want to change. Oh, this merger is never going to work. Leadership is never going to follow through with their promise. It's all just politics. Nobody really cares about our half of this merger. That other congregation is just trying to swallow us up, just so that they can keep their budgets, out of deficit. People are genuinely just selfish, right? Now, what this does is it creates an us and them dynamic. I want to remind us, humans are susceptible to us and them dynamics because it's the cleanest and easiest way to build a sense of belonging. You don't have to galvanize a broad, diverse body politic when you create an us and them. You immediately get the people who see themselves in you and your ideas, and you don't need to worry about anybody else because they're evil anyway. It's the easiest way to create a sense of belonging is by that cynicism. And even if you think that the majority of your people are fence sitters, when you're operating a merger between 2 churches or 2 lemonade stands, there's a large percentage of people who are already playing with the us and them dynamic. Oh, those uptown people are going to come here and tell us how to worship? That new pastor, he's only been here a year and a half, and he's going to tell us that this is the only path forward? Of course. That's because he's not even going to be here after June. So what does he care? Right? I know I'm like doing a caricature, but the voice of cynicism, it is internal, and it often is held by the perceived fence sitters. And finally, the voice of fear. Fear blocks your open will. What if I lose my job? What if I'm wrong? Like, think of the inner child here. What if they reject me? I just want to be liked, and what if they don't like me? What if the whole thing falls apart? Right? What this does is it closes down the possibility for courage, for new action, and we fall in love with the world as it is because it prevents us from having to face the fear over the world as it could be. We tap into political movements that, within our own institutions that idealize the past. When I was working at this synagogue that I mentioned before, there are 700 seats in the sanctuary. When I got there, the incoming president, who had been a part of that congregation for a very, very, very long time, walked me into the sanctuary. Gorgeous, big dome. The acoustics there are like you are, being um, uh, sung to by, like a group of heavenly angels. And she said to me, when I got here, we used to have 700 people in this sanctuary every Shabbat morning. And I thought, whoa. Because at most we were averaging 150, 200 by the time I got there. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. And I held that vision in my mind of, well, that's the world we got to build. We have to build a kind of worship experience and a kind of sense of community and belonging. And by the way, we also have to have the best lunch, because that gets people into the seats. Because nobody shows up just for lunch. They show up for the last 10 minutes of services so they can walk down with everybody, be like, yeah, I was here for 2 hours. So were you. Great sermon, And we need to do that to get 700 in those seats again. And every single Shabbat, I would watch her look and count the heads. And every single time, 200, look on her face was like, man, we should have had nobody show up this Shabbat. Because she couldn't count the 200 that were there. In her mind, were the 500 that weren't. You know what happened about 2 years in? I was in the library one day. I was looking for a volume of Talmud. And I saw this thing called the Temple Emmanuel Yearbook. And it was the 50th or 75th anniversary yearbook. And it shared all of these like statistics about the growth of the synagogue and like how, and pictures of the sanctuary and its fullness. And it said, at our peak, I think the peak was something like 1986 or 7, or I don't remember what, it was somewhere around there. And it said at our peak, we averaged about 320 people every Shabbat. Okay, at our peak. Now, what does all this mean? That we create an idealized version of the past as a way of protecting ourselves from the fear that A, it wasn't actually as good as we remember it, and B, whatever's coming is definitely going to be worse than what it used to be. So we build a version of the past that is so idealized that nothing can ever surpass it. That's pretty unhealthy. That's called making an idol, right? We have done idol worship to our own histories, to what we used to be, so that we can be that again. When the truth is, we never were that. We never were that. That voice of fear is at the heart of our own inner turmoil and why some of our inner condition struggles so mightily to meet the moment. And know that whether it's the resistor or the fence sitter or even the early adopter, that they have those three voices in their hearts and minds and spirits every single day too. So just know that when you're speaking to somebody, even the one who voted no when you wanted a yes, don't ask what they're voting no for. Ask, what is it that you love most that you want to hold on to? The one thing I used to say to, we were at Glean Network, it's an organization I run. It's an incubator for what we call spiritual entrepreneurs. You know what I tell them? Because you're supposed to go, one of the processes of entrepreneurship is go out and interview a bunch of potential customers. Find out, don't ask them what they want, but get a sense of what's their life like, and what do they struggle with, and so on. And what I started telling them of the last few years is, before you do that, because you've got a great vision, whether it's a community, a startup, an app, whatever, go, great. You're going to give people chills with this beautiful vision, prophetic vision of the world that you're trying to build. Great. I want you to go talk to people in a dying congregation, like one that really is on its last legs. Go find them. I don't care where you have to go. And ask them, what have they loved most that they stand to lose in this moment? Ultimately, you are not, we have no business declaring our vision for the future unless we really understand what people have loved most about the past. Because at best, your new startup, at best, you're going to get people to love it a fraction as much as those people who love their dying congregation love it. That's the world you want to build. Something that people love that much, that they will idealize it, and that in their mind's eye, it was as good as they imagined it to have been. Think about Moses and the Israelites. Hey, at least in Egypt, we had 3 square meals. Moses is like, we are literally going to a place called the Promised Land. You were literally enslaved for 430 years. You are free now. How do you not see that this vision is better than that one? And they were like, yeah, but they had meat. Like, I don't want to be a vegetarian for the next 40 years. This stinks. All right. So find someone who loves that much. And that's what you want to build around. Those people can be your greatest advocates. But you have to identify the loss. Okay. Let's see. I promised interventions. I'm going to give you 5. It's going to be somewhat quick, but again, we can share the slides later. I'm going to give you 5 interventions, 5 ways to actually manifest these ideas and identify the double agents inside of you and inside of your communities. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. Sound good? Okay. So remember when I said we'll have breakout sessions? Good. Don doesn't remember that. It never happened. Okay. And in my recollection, this has gone exactly according to plan. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Good. Glad we had this talk. Okay. The first is a listening campaign. All of you know what a listening campaign is. Before you lead change, listen to the system. When I got to that synagogue, my first 100 days, I had 100 coffees with 100 people. Turns out I love coffee and I love people just as much. All right. And the great thing about those coffees is they weren't scripted. I literally just asked the executive director to circle 100 names, to generate 100 random names, and I would pick up the phone and call them. And I listened. I just listened. What do you love? Tell me a beautiful story. Tell me a memory. Why are you a part of this place? It shaped everything I did in that community moving forward. I had all kinds of ideas and ideals, and I had my MBA. Oh, I'm going to fix the finances, and we're going to do this, and we're going to raise the capital, blah, 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 blah. No. I'm going to listen. And here's the most important part about listening. Even if not one iota of opinion or story that came out of those listening efforts was actionable, you know what I made sure that people knew? That they were seen, heard, and known. And you know what they felt? Beloved. I didn't ask them for anything. I didn't tell them I needed anything from them. I didn't even have an agenda. I didn't want to sell them anything. For 45 minutes or an hour, I just made sure that they felt known, seen, and heard, and that if we did it right, maybe they walked away feeling beloved. That's a listening campaign for you. The next is called an immunity to change map. It's a framework developed by Lisa Leahy and Robert Keegan at Harvard. And it's about surfacing your hidden competing commitments. Right? We have improvement goals, maybe for ourselves or for our communities. And then we have to ask, what are we doing instead of that? Right? That senior rabbi that I spoke about earlier, she would have said, I want to delegate more. What's she doing instead of delegating more? Doing everything herself. What's the hidden competing commitment? Well, I want to feel needed. I want to feel needed. So what's the big assumption? If I don't respond to all of these emails, people will no longer need me. So we can create a little matrix of all of the improvement goals that we have, what we're doing instead, what's the competing or thing in tension, the commitment that's holding tension, and what's the assumption behind it. Then you get to call the assumptions out and figure out how to unstick yourself and your time. The third is called the designated dissenter. Not a devil's advocate, because I don't like that language, especially around people of faith. Right? But some way to build challenge into your structure. Right? Before a key meeting, you're going to ask someone, okay, I want you to argue as if you are a resistor. And do it authentically. Like we're at debate club and you're only going to get an A if I actually believe your argument. Okay? I want you to argue for a different position. And don't always pick the difficult person. Don't always pick the naysayer. But pick someone who might not even believe in that argument, give them time to prepare, and then thank them afterwards. But plant some, we often will plant people to agree with us. I want you to plant someone to disagree with you. Because if you have unanimity, you have the wrong people around the table. Next, the after-action review. This is what we do in what is done in the military. Every single thing that is done in the military gets an AAR, after-action report. I've been working with the military for 4.5 years. Every talk I've ever given, I get an after-action report that's longer than the talk. And they don't pull any punches. Nobody's writing those AARs to make me feel good. Trust me. Okay? But every one of them makes me better at my job. Every single one of them makes the next speech better. Every one of them makes the next workshop more effective, which then makes the leaders more capable. That's the job of an after-action report. I can tell you how to do it, but I'm keeping an eye on our time. Finally, the sacred container for loving rebuke. You have to create a sacred container where people can actually challenge one another in love, right? Just as Jethro did to Moses. Now, you as the leader probably need a really small circle, a cabinet of people, and you need to practice how to challenge how to let them challenge you and invite their challenge, their critique, their feedback. Right? Imagine that it's just you and one of them in the cockpit. You're the pilot, they're the co-pilot. They see something that you don't. So how can you let go of the controls for long enough? Maybe it's 30 minutes every month. Let go of the controls, ask the right questions, create a trusting container, and let the co-pilot give you some guidance. Let them take controls for a little bit, just long enough that you can see, ooh, we're off course. There's danger ahead. I made a mistake. Make sense? Sacred container. That means there has to really be love and faith in that room. Loving rebuke. Okay. We got through a lot. I'm going to pause and just open it up. We got 3 minutes, and I really want to honor your questions and your curiosities. And I'm going to repeat. You can scroll all the way up, get my email address. I'm here. I love this stuff. And I want you to be tremendously, I want you to achieve the dreams that you set out to achieve when you first accepted your call. I think the world will be much better off for it. And I think in this moment, the world needs it. So if there's any way that I can be supportive in your journey, I would just be honored to stay in conversation. I came out, I was a 30-year-old rabbi, and I was leading an 88-year-old synagogue with a $2 million budget, 2,000 people, and a building that was kind of falling apart. I'm 30 years old. Yeah, I have the degree, but great. And so I had tremendous, and by the way, within 12 months, proposed and then implemented one of the most significant changes to their business model in 50 years. And that took such tremendous, you have to have a little bit of holy chutzpah. one of my mentors when I was going through the placement process. My wife and I were in Los Angeles, and our baby Micah was just born, and our firstborn, and looking all around the country. I'm interviewing in Dallas and Chicago and Baltimore and Providence and Boston, blah, 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 blah. Our families were from Boston. We wanted to be close by, right? And it was like with me and all my colleagues who were in our final year of rabbinical school, it was as if we had forgotten all the theology that we had ever learned because we're trying to micromanage our futures. And I had a mentor of mine say, you know what, Elan, what if you entered these next couple of months and imagine that you'll go where God needs you to be? And then when you get there, you'll find out what God needs you to do. And then you'll do it. Imposter syndrome is so healthy. It's like having a resistor built in who can push back on overconfidence. And sometimes the resistor needs to yield to God's call. God put you there. Ben, God put you there to have those sacred conversations with these two churches, and God willing to show them the way. And if and when the time comes that you move on to a new congregation and a new call and somewhere else far away, that's where God will need you to be too. There's not a corner of this earth that God doesn't need us to be in. God also needs not only to have faith in God putting us in the right places, but in our ability to do what it is God needs us to do in those places too. The designated dissenter. That person's job is to disagree, but you got to plant them and coach them and have them do the research such that they can speak authentically as if they disagree. And then honor that disagreement. One of the greatest, I think one of the most important facets of the Talmud. Right? Jews are known as the people of the book. Talmud is a kind of many generations after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Talmud began to get compiled through conversations and arguments that rabbis had. In the Talmud, there are 5,000 arguments. Do you know how many of those arguments are settled in the Talmud?
None. None of
Oh, very, very cynical. That's the voice of cynicism. No, I love it, Kyle. That's a good guess. You're very close. It's 50. 50 get resolved, which tells you that if all 5,000 arguments still get codified, and here we are, 1,800 years later, 1,700 years later, reading those arguments, learning from those arguments, watching how they argue, it's not about the results. It's not about settling the yes or no. It's about the process of being in disagreement. Can you do it lovingly? Can you learn from the person before disagreeing with them? Can you quote their beliefs, their opinions, their lived experiences before you advance your own? Right? Can you hold tension such that the world as it is can eventually yield and give way to the world as it could be, but you still have to live in the tension of the world as it is? Can you elevate all of the opinions around the table? Having a designated dissenter models that for your community. You, as the pastor, elevate the voice and the dignity of the person with whom you most disagree, and all of us can learn from it and be better for it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you look at you could say we have a 1% success rate, right? Or you can say, right, only 50 out of 5,000 get resolved. Or you can say, actually, we have a 99% success rate. Because success means staying in relationship in spite of the fact that we disagree. In fact, not in spite of, because of the fact that we disagree. Okay. I think I've taken up too much time. It's already 2:05. I want to honor all of your time and commitment for being here. I want to wish you Godspeed on all of the change that you want to make. I hope you see it in due time and due course. And I'm really, truly grateful for the work you do in the world and for the fact that you dedicated your time to be here with me and with one another. What an incredible gift. Thank you.